Hi, and welcome to Minar, the Society of Prop Managers webinar series for live theater prop professionals. I'm Ben Homan, Vice President and SPAM member, and the props director at the Utah Shakespeare Festival. The Society of Prop Managers, known as SPAM, was formed in 1994 by a small group of prop professionals in the Midwest to address issues of common importance and to create parity with other production departments. Today, we are an association of 150 plus professional prop managers and educators from not-for-profit producing organizations, opera companies, and educational institutions. We've built an international communication and support network that shares resources, information, solutions, and techniques, as well as safety information, continuing education, and stock. As with previous webinars, we're requesting pay what you can donations to help support this programming and our annual grants for early career prop professionals. If you can afford to donate, links to donate will be in the chat. We truly appreciate any help you can give. We've enabled live transcriptions for this webinar. If you'd like to use them, click on the live transcript button on the bottom and then select show subtitle. Alternatively, you can click view full transcript to see it in the meeting side panel. I'm joined tonight by SPAM members Kristin Ward to journey into the storytelling roots of prop work and theater making. Kristin Ward is a multifaceted theater artist who's been working in props in the Pittsburgh area for nearly 2 decades. Behind the scenes, Kristin assists in overseeing student crews building props at Carnegie Mellon School of Drama, as well as union prop run crews at Pittsburgh Opera. When she steps out into the lights, Kristin writes, performs, and yes, props her own original works, which aim to preserve storytelling traditions and make folklore accessible and relevant to modern audiences. Please feel free to share stories and ask any questions you have in the chat, as we'll leave room at the end to trade and share stories and pose our questions to Kristin. Let's get started. Kristin, I hand the Zoom over to you.
Hi, thanks for joining me, and thanks to SPAM for having me. Little bit about me. I've been doing props for a little over 20 years now. I went to undergrad for theater at Nazareth University, was Nazareth College. And when I got there, I was focusing on performing. So mostly just straight acting. And I'd fallen in love with it in high school. You know, that's an old story that a lot of people have. But yeah, so I fell in love with theater through acting. I went to my undergrad for acting, but my undergrad is also a liberal arts school. So we learned theater arts in a liberal arts setting, which means I was there for acting, but I learned a little bit of tech direction, a little bit of scenic design, little bit of stage management, little bit of costuming, sewing. And so after I graduated and came to Pittsburgh, all of those skills ended up translating really well into a career in props. So my first job that was a full-time non-freelance was with Point Park. I was there for about 4 or 5 years, and then I started at Carnegie Mellon as an overhire and just kind of worked my way up. In the meantime, I was still doing a lot of performing. And my philosophy a little bit was that I wanted to make the art that I wanted to see in the world. So I, wasn't traditionally cast in a lot. It was also, auditioning's a lot of work, and especially in a small town where not all of, or a smaller city where not all actors actually get paid for their work. But I still wanted to perform. I still had that bug. So I do a lot of storytelling. I self-produce. I also do belly dancing and sideshow arts. I was showing Karen a photo earlier today. I did a very different workshop for dancers that was dancing on top of goblets. So upturned, dancing on the foot part. And it was neat kind of feeling that crossover, and really being able to get to celebrate my hybrid nature, being able to tell dancers how to prop a show. And now I get to talk to prop managers about storytelling, which is super exciting. Uh, so I'm going to start out with a story. And I need your help. This is interactive storytelling. So there's a couple of places where I need an object or an animal or anything exciting you can think of. Use your imagination, right? Save gas, drive your imagination. I wore this shirt and realized you could only see part of it. And so I'll prompt you, and then remember some of the things that came up, because we're going to revisit them towards the end of this Spaminar. So there once was a fisherman, and every day he would go out to cast his net. Now he was very humble, and he didn't want to be greedy, so he would only cast his net 4 times a day. He usually went to the same spot, but after a while, it started to feel a little bit overfished. He was getting the same things, or it was a little smaller, and his load wasn't as much as before. So he thought, well, I'm going to try that other spot that's a little bit darker, a little bit more secluded. Maybe not as many other people have fished there, and I can get a good haul. And so he went and he cast his net, and very quickly it began to feel heavy. So he thought, oh, this is great. I've already caught something. And so he began to haul it up. He pulled and he hauled and he pulled and he hauled and he pulled and he hauled and he pulled and he hauled, until finally he was looking at, what do you think he found? It's my first time. A boot. Thank you, Lauren. It'll get easier as it goes. I don't do as much interactive storytelling on Zoom because it can have like little lulls and things. So he found a boot. It was an old, stinky, smelly, gross boot, and he threw it down and had to wash his net off a little bit, and finally, again, threw it into the sea. Now, this time he waited a little bit longer, and finally, it did feel heavy again. And so he pulled and he hauled and he pulled. This one was a little bit more of a struggle. He pulled and he hauled, and he got a mermaid. Well, he couldn't take a mermaid home to his wife. So he untangled her from the net, and he let her go. And again, he pulled and he hauled. And this time it felt like it stuck. He thought, well, maybe this is a fish, or hopefully something at least edible this time. And so he pulled and he hauled and he pulled and he hauled and he pulled, and he found, what do you think he found? A talking fish with a crush on the mermaid. Thank you, Jim. So the talking fish was really tired of granting wishes to bakers' wives. And he really loved this mermaid. And he started talking about how he wanted to woo her. And the fisherman he just didn't have time for this. He's like, fish, you gotta go to couples therapy or something. I'm not your guy. I just want some food. And he let the fish go. And finally, again, cast his net. Now, this time he knew he only had one more shot. And so he pulled and he hauled and he pulled and he hauled and he pulled and he hauled. And up came a little silver pot. It was full to the weight of it. It was very heavy. And it had some really interesting markings and a seal around it. Now, the fisherman lacking in judgment, decided to take his knife and undo the seal very carefully on this pot. And as he opened it, a pile of smoke poured out, and a genie said, "Choose your death." Now, the fisherman was very frightened, of course, and he looked at the genie and he said, What have I done? I have set you free. Shouldn't I get a couple of wishes or something? And the genie said, "Oh, but I have been in that pot for 3,000 years. And in the first 1,000 years, I was going to grant anyone who set me free anything they desired in the entire universe. They could have been a king, they could have been emperor, but no one came. In the second 1,000 years, I decided that whoever freed me should get 3 wishes. Again, no one came. And finally, by the 3rd 1,000 years of no one coming to rescue me, I grew so angry that I decided that all I would give was to be able to choose your death. And so I'm waiting." Well, before he became a fisherman, the fisherman was a prop manager, so he knew how to deal with some difficult entities. And so he looked at the small pot and he looked at the genie and he said, "Oh, genie, what I just don't understand is how a being so great as you managed to get in this tiny little pot." And the genie said, "Well, I'll show you what I can do." And it turned back in the smoke, and the smoke whirled around and went in to the pot. Whereupon the fisherman slammed the lid down on it, sealed it up tight, and tossed it into the sea. He went home, a little bit hungry, his net's a little bit worse for wear, but he knew he would have a great story to tell. So that is a variation on The Fisherman and the Genie. It's an old Arabian Nights tale. And every time I tell it, it's a little bit different. So is live theater, just a little bit different every time it's told. And storytelling is actually the oldest form of theater. Well before there were stages or props, people would sit around campfires and they would tell each other stories of hunt, stories of how they thought the world worked. And pretty much all of what we know as theater grew out of that performative storytelling. Good stories ignite imagination. They draw in your audience. And there are so many ways that we put them on stage, whether they're spoken by the actors or whether they're unspoken by what we surround ourselves with. I wanted to give Larry Heyman's Spaminar on set dressing a little bit of a shout out in this because I was watching that and was really inspired by his phrasing of us prop managers being curators of storytelling objects. And I thought that was really the most beautiful way to phrase that, storytelling objects as props. So we're going to do a little bit of a refresher. We're going to revisit 6th or 7th grade, but not the painful version. So this is where I will also leave the chat up because I'm going to bring a whiteboard up. So we can just continue with this in the chat then. I was going to be all fancy and type and use a whiteboard, but we'll just tell stories instead. So what makes a story? What are the key elements? When I do this presentation for the freshmen, and it's a little bit more live. It is, we talk a little bit about, yes, characters. There's a protagonist, an antagonist, a plot. There are props. There are props in the story. A beginning, a middle, and end. So in our story parts, right, we have exposition, which we do tell a lot with our props, right? Sometimes that's the first thing that people notice as the curtain comes up. There's props, there's furniture, there's set dressing. That's all part of the exposition. And then as things progress in the story, leading to conflict and climax and resolution, you can see things on the set often change, or just the way that people interact with things change. It's very different if somebody's sitting there with their cup, or if somebody at the end is kind of leaning into something. We have different ways of interacting with things as the story progresses. In each partnership between performer and item helps tell those stories as well. So what are our W's of a story? So thinking about storytelling and maybe leaning into journalism a little bit, those magical W words. Got, yep, what, where, what, who, where, and why. So with props, we're telling a little bit of all those things. I think in a way, the who might be the most important. Because it's sort of, when we're creating someone's space, we're not just creating a set, we're creating a place where the character lives. As a performer, there's something really magical when you have that moment and you walk onto a set and something clicks inside, because, oh yes, of course, this is my shop that I work in, and I do props here, and these are the pandas that I found at the warehouse. So it's it really brings not just audience but performers into the world. When I do paper props, I'm really careful about what I put on them, because they tell a lot of side story. I think I did that. Yeah. So I love making paper props because it's a way to tell the story to the performers. And when you're aware of what they need and what's in the script, you can kind of go out of your way to tell a little bit of extra of the story. So this was from a little night music, which we just did. And some of the things that they talk about in the song Glamorous Life is all of these letters and newspaper clippings that Desiree is sending her child. And so I was able to write a full article about her award that she was winning at the Helsingborg Arts Council. And those little moments, they're not always seen by audience, especially if you're on a large stage, but I think it creates a moment that is a little bit more realistic, a little bit more in the world of the story than just a Lorem Ipsum piece. Um, for set dressing, this was from This Old Haunt. And so we worked with a character who was not actually in the show. She was a group of young ladies, their music teacher. And so they inherited her cabin. So everything in the cabin was reflective of an older music teacher that these young women had known, but maybe not known fully. So it had quite a few secrets in it that sort of helped develop who she was and tell her story. Um, we included, of course, a lot of music, a lot of sheet music, piano, guitar, that sort of thing. But also, it's an old hunting cabin, and it was her getaway. So there are all these really nifty little pockets where we have uh, literature and little crafting uh, kits and pieces. Um, and in the script, they do mention animal heads. So we decided that she was from a long line of ladies who hunt. And so we have dueling pistols that if you could see the plaque, they were given to her great great grandmother by Annie Oakley. There were also a bunch of photos on the wall. Um, this one I snuck in. This is my great grandmother and my grandmother, and I think possibly her mother as well. And then also throughout the set, we hid all of these postcards that were part of the dialogue mentioned. One of the characters was a travel agent and had sent her music teacher these postcards from all over the world. And so we hid them in every little nook of the set. Props can also tell stories that might not be in the specific dialogue, but they just sort of tell just a little bit extra about the character. And so this moment, which is very tiny, um, there's sort of a brutish character who, in the little night music, gives Desiree some flowers. And we thought that with the type of man he is, he might have just ripped him out of the ground. Because the director did ask for daisies, and we ended up with I ended up putting roots on them just to tell that little extra story of, yeah, he probably just ripped them out of the ground outside, didn't trim them, just thought, oh, I should take her flowers, rip. Um, so we tell those kinds of stories a lot. Um, there we go. I do not miss the times where we were on Zoom all the time. That's for sure. Ah, great. I love the, thank you for using the chat. You're also welcome to unmute. I'm used to dealing with much more interactive audience. But yes, family photos from actors, and personal paper props to copy and put in the show. Yeah, those are really fun to add. And in family photos, I've done a lot of photos where, you know, you just kind of get somebody's fitting photo and stick it in a frame. But when you have time and you can really get something from their family or something that might show them as younger, if they're playing, if they're um, doing a little bit of like a trip down memory lane with their character. As prop people, we tell stories all the time. We tell stories on stage and we tell stories off stage. So we talk about how we became prop people. We talk about what our biggest challenges have become. We tell stories to network, to get jobs, and sometimes just to debrief and share. These pandas behind me have their story. I was cleaning out our warehouse. Everybody goes through these warehouse clean outs. It feels constant. And in the middle of a day where it was 80 degrees in the warehouse and it was hot and it was muggy and gray out, so it was also kind of dark. And I was sorting out the most scary box of porcelain dolls you could ever imagine. They had been in a show where they had to break them. I think everybody has done that show, the broken porcelain doll show. And I don't know why they were kept, but I had to sort through them. Scary doll after scary doll. And the next box I got out didn't have any labels on it. And I had no idea how long it had been there. And about 20 of this face peered up at me when I opened the box. Well, I got out my Sharpie and I labeled the box pandas. Didn't think much of it, except that they had momentarily saved me from porcelain doll terror. And fast forward maybe a year or so, and I'm at the warehouse again, and a friend of mine had posted on Facebook a photo challenge for something surreal. I said, I got this. I filled a bathtub up with pandas and I put a mannequin inside of it and posted it. And my manager, who might be on here, I don't know, I haven't flipped through everyone's faces yet, saw the photo, and instead of reaming me out for wasting time, he thought it was very funny and thought we should make a series. And so when we're able to have time, I was able to do it more during the pandemic because I was just looking for ways to stay relevant and to keep our social media account active, even though we were less active. And so we started doing vignettes with these pandas. It escalated to where they do now have costumes. We tried to dress one up as a dog to get it into the School of Drama dog calendar this year. Apparently the people running the calendar saw through its disguise, so it did not get in. But we've since tried to squeeze them into various shows. And so I wanted to open this up a little bit so we can practice telling stories. I know this is sort of a quiet format, but I want to kind of invite, you can raise your hand, and I want to hear some stories from you. I want to hear stories about how maybe you got into props, or I would love to hear a story about a talking fish who's in love with a mermaid.
I'm good to go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I figured you wouldn't have typed that if you didn't have something very specific in mind.
Well, this has nothing to do with my friend the fish who is in love with a mermaid.
Oh, okay.
I, I don't feel comfortable discussing that without them approving of it. But as far as props that tell stories, in a lot of cases, I think we do this as much for the actors, or maybe more for the actors than we do for the audience, because a large part of our job is to support text and character and to help actors feel comfortable and more invested in their character. My I'd have had a picture of this because I've really actually, Kristin, been looking forward to this one. This is right up my alley. I love this. You're doing a fun job on this. But my laptop with more or less everything in life on it went home to Jesus about a week ago when I was on my way out of town. So I do not have a picture of this, but we did a production of The Diary of Anne Frank at Milwaukee Repertory Theater, directed by KJ Sanchez and designed by Dan Conway. And it was a 3-story set. The room that the Frank family and 3 other people, maybe 4, math, were in, was the stage level, and it actually encompassed the exact same number of square feet as the number of square feet that those people lived in for those years. Up top was a little 2-3 person bedroom, and below was the room with the secret entrance to the room in which the Frank family and everybody else was forced to live for those years. One of the things, and I promise not to take the rest of the Spaminar on this, I'll try. One of the things we did was we dressed the lower level as if it had been a room in which the spice factory purveyor that Mr. Frank ran, that he was no longer allowed to run because he was a Jew, so his partner took over. We dressed it like that, and then we pushed everything back, and everything that had come out of the level on which the Frank family was then living, which had been the test kitchen for the Frank family spice business, was pushed in front of that stuff. We had lots of gawkers. We actually had to put up a fence around the pit because of what we called the gawkers who would come and look and stare. But my favorite storytelling prop from that guy was, and it came up super last minute, like we were in tech. And this was not a request from the director and the designer. I heard them talking while I was dressing the set, and we crammed every possible inch of that set with everything these people would need to survive in a tiny closed space. So there were fold out cots that had clothes and things piled underneath them and so on. But I heard Dan Conway and KJ Sanchez, designer and director, murmuring to each other while I was dressing. And KJ said, "Oh, we can't ask him about that. He's already too busy." And Dan Conway said, "No, this guy gets off on this kind of stuff." So I said, "What's going on?" And they told me that they had just discovered, because KJ continued to read research material through the entire tech, which made some people nuts, but I really liked it, that they did not have what we thought would probably have been the family menorah for the menorah scene, that they had left the menorah in their home so that the Germans would think, holy shit, these people took off real quick. They left this. So one of the people in the play, one of the people who lived upstairs on the 3rd level, was clearly the handyman for the group. And so we thought, well, then this guy built them a menorah, but from what? What do these people have? And so I sat down with my team and we talked about, well, okay, what do these people do from day to day? There is a scene in which Mrs. Franck and her daughters are mending clothing and knitting socks and things like that. Mr. Franck taught school. They got packages, care packages from a couple of people outside who delivered things to them. And so oh, boy, do I wish I had a picture of this thing. We made a menorah, the central stem of which was stacked spool threads. And the base for the candles was a ruler, like a school ruler, old
Yeah.
school, around 3/8 of an inch thick, something like that. And the bobèches for the candles were bottle caps.
Oh, that's great.
And with no warning, I presented this to the cast before they went into their next tech, and there were actual tears. And
Yep.
and we presented on closing night. I mailed the menorah to the director. It was just such a great storytelling opportunity.
Mhm.
And it's one of the primary reasons I do that. Man, if I didn't get to tell stories with stuff, the rest of this crap just wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. And it feels like very often it's those last minute things.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you get last minute notes, but sometimes you get the rare opportunity of getting caught up enough with everyone else's notes that you get to do the ones that are for you. And like putting the roots on those daisies. I knew that those needed that from the beginning of me giving them the daisies. And then finally, like last day of tech, I was able to do my notes for me. And I wasn't quite like, when I look at the photo, I'm like, I didn't quite match color with the tape, and I could have painted it and made it a little bit more streamlined. But from large stage holding it, um, you could see them, and it just added just that little extra story to what was going on in the scene.
And telling the story of the environment as well. I'm freelancing now, and for those of you who have not met me, I am roughly 143 years old, and so I still work off of a clipboard with a legal pad on it, and I always keep a face page on the legal pad that has the notes that everybody knows. No, the underside of the table is not painted yet. We'll get there. Yeah, that sort of thing. About 2 pages in are what they called at Milwaukee Rep during the 25 years that I worked there, the Jim Guy notes, the who would bother notes to some people. But those were the notes I always look forward to doing, and getting it right and getting it tiny.
So who else has a story?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously 100% echo everything that Jim just said, and came up in props learning from Jim, as many of us have. And also, two things that I was told really early in my career was the audience might not see it, but the actors will. So of course you start there. And if it's not, there might be something that you don't make tiny, and the audience won't know what that is, but they'll know there's something missing. They'll know it's not quite right. They won't know why, but they'll know there's something not quite right. So those are things, and I've been doing this for 20 years.
They go by fast.
No, but I've been at my artistic home for 17 years, and in the past 2 years, I think I've I've kind of launched off of that basis of really, really focusing on just helping the actors tell their story, really focusing on that internal work, which I love so much, and loves things. Like, I love objects. You come to my house and it's like I registered at my wedding at my theater for stuff. I just bring everything home. I love all of the things and I keep them safe. And I started thinking, like, while the audience doesn't need to know all of these details, they should know some things. They should know about our things.
Mhm.
And so I started really thinking about, I started this little segment called Culture and Region as Told Through Props. And so I'll like pull something from the show that really speaks to me in terms of the storytelling and the culture and the region of the play, and tell a little bit about that. And it goes out on social media and it's on our education page. So it's an opportunity for folks to kind of get, be like, oh, let me look at that thing that I just saw in that play and think about what that means to the culture of the story and the region in which the story is being told on a larger level outside of the make-believe, four walls that we're inside. And that's been really, really fun to do. And it could be anything from so we did arsenic and old lace.
Mhm.
And what was really fun about that was I got to learn, when I do this, I become all like dramaturgy, and learned about like foraging in New York. Like, people forage
Oh,
in the
yeah.
city in New
There are groups
York.
in Pittsburgh that do that too.
Right. And I didn't realize that. So, I'm always learning from these things too. And these women in Arsenic and Old Lace live in Brooklyn, and there's a very small allusion in the script to a graveyard that's near their house.
Mhm.
And elderberries were grown in graveyards usually, because the soil was so rich. And the elderberries were what they made their wine out of, which is what they killed, their dudes from. So being able to just kind of like pull that in and be like, here's the glass of poison, and here is how these women got it just right outside their door in Brooklyn. By the way, you can forage in New York. And that's very literal. And we don't always do literal plays at court. We just did Antigone, which was completely non-literal. But there were hardly any props in the show at all. And the director said to me, like, hey, what do you think about reading the script and just letting me know if anything pops out? Because I'm not into props. I would have no props, she says. I
Mhm.
would have no props because I'm just not into it, and there was a part of me that was just like, like, cool, I don't have to do anything. But, then there was the other part of me that was like, amazing. Nobody has ever asked me to do something like that. So I read it, and the first thing I thought of was, there's a mention that whoever, is going to bury, I'm not going to tell the whole story of Antigone if you don't know, but basically, this woman, if she buried her brother, was going to be stoned to death in the
Mhm.
town square. And I watched this movie at one time of the stoning, and I couldn't get stones out of my head since I watched it. So every time I saw anything made of stone, I thought about this horrible
Oh,
scene where this woman is stoned to death. And so stones rose to the surface, as stones do not do, but they did. And every prop in the show was it was sand, it was a cinder block, it was worry stones, and I was able to help tell this story based on something that spoke to me through the script. And so when I did the culture and region was just court theater, basically, and how we came about that uh, journey of storytelling through
Mhm.
objects.
Lack of props also tell a lot of story.
Yeah.
We did a version of A Doll's House earlier this year, and the set was very different from this old haunt. It was stark. There was so much beige and just a lot of straight lines, and it was Christmas, but it was just sort of like a tree that looked like it just was ordered straight from a store, without many, when we have our trees at home, often there's like all these like little personal things on there. And it was just, here's a fancy tree with some silver decorations. Here's a lot of beige. And then we peppered like just a few kids' toys here and there, but it wasn't that good family clutter that you get with like a happy relationship and a happy family. It was very very stark, very performative. And so it sort of fit this this relationship that was really strained and in there trying to keep up appearances. So sometimes we tell stories with lack of props too, or with the few that we choose. Who else has a story?
So I'm a stage manager, but I am going in for props for this upcoming season.
Mhm.
I've only propped, I think, 3 shows before. So very new, very green.
Yeah.
But the theater that I have worked beforehand as a stage manager, already had their stage management positions full. So they asked if I want to do props, and I've propped there before. So I'm going for a whole season, which is going to be fun. But I'm very
Won't
much,
be the first person to fall into props.
yeah, it'll be great. It'll be so much fun. So it's exciting, and it'll be super great. We're also in the process of moving prop storage during the summer, which will be exciting. Oh,
Yeah. We are familiar.
I know it's
Sorry.
it's a good vibe. I've got such high hopes. I'm really excited actually. Because it's all great, wonderful things. I'm realizing I've always propped and ASM'd, or it was before I had my union card. So now I'll just be doing props, which will be fabulous. But I realize it's also been an instance where every time I've propped, I've always had an interesting scenic designer moment where the scenic designer either left the show prematurely, or we
Oh.
were in college, or there were other things handled. And so now the scenic designer that I'm about to be working with seems to be fabulous. And
Mhm.
so I'm like, this is going to be really interesting. And I'm so excited, but I'm also like, I don't know how to navigate this situation, because I'm like, this is great. So yeah, it's really fun. I'm like, this
Mhm.
is fabulous, and I get to work with somebody that I'm not leaning on everything, which is
Mhm.
fabulous. I'm so excited. So yeah, but that's it.
Yeah,
And we're doing Ernest and Lucky Stiff, so it's just cucumber sandwiches all over the place. And we're
Oh, are
kind of
they
music too.
consumable or non-consumable?
Oh, it's so many consumables. Yeah, it's everywhere. Yep, we're doing everything.
I mean, but like the ASM knows just as much about the props and has such a close
Mhm.
relationship with the props as the props people do, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's how I think before I had my union card at this theater, I ASM'd and propped Tuna Christmas, which was such a blast of a show. And so that was so much fun, and that was the first time that I propped there, and it was an absolute blast, and I loved it. So yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm excited. But that was during their winter season.
Yeah, I work at at Carnegie Mellon University, so I get new group of student designers about every 4 years. And I think some of my favorite experiences have been where either the designer was very specific about what they wanted, which is really nice. Sometimes that's really hard to pull out of students. Or if the designer is really specific about what world they're trying to create, and then they let me do it. That can be hard to get across sometimes, though. It's just tell me what your world is, right? Tell me your story that you're trying to tell, and then trust me. One of my favorite additions that I added to this old haunt, they were part of it is it's like got a little bit of a supernatural feel to it. It's the three young women kind of go into their old music teacher's cabin, and they decide to hold a séance. And so I wanted to hide a bunch of little supernatural winks around. And one of the things that I pulled, because I knew the designer would need it, might not know yet, but he needed it, is having a horseshoe over the door. And there were a few other little small things we hid, but I knew it had to have a horseshoe and wind chimes. So we've got a little bit more time. Does anybody have any other stories or questions? You can open it up to questions as well.
There was a phrase that you all were using earlier about making it tiny. Can you specify what that means?
I'm trying to remember who was talking about that. Was it about tiny details? Yeah. So thinking about the really small details that only the actor might see. So in like in the paper pipes that I showed, the audience is never going to see the fine print in all of those articles, but being able to have that there, especially if it's referencing some of the lines that are in the show, can be really valuable. So you used to tell your students that if you put Jim says he used to tell his students that if you put a fine art librarian and a stage manager in a can and shake it real hard, a prop person will spill out. The one stroke of irony is that one of the things that I learned when I was in a liberal arts setting in theater was that I didn't want to stage manage. But yeah, we do have to do that work though very often. You know, when I'm with the opera, it's a union crew, so we're doing a lot of the spiking, and a lot of the, we set up the prop tables. Here we have to keep track of our working prop list. We have to do the boring parts too.
And knowing what happens in the rehearsal room and how to deal with the director and what a stage manager is going through is impossibly integrated into everything that we do. It's really important to know what's going on in the room, even though you can't always be in the room.
Any other questions? So I'm going to leave you all with a little bit of an assignment. And this is just something that I naturally do because I'm a prop nerd. Next time you go over to somebody's house, especially if it's somebody that maybe you haven't known for a while, or maybe you've known a long time, but never really thought about what they have. Sit in their house and kind of look around at what they've got and how they arrange things, and what stories their stuff might tell them about them, or might tell you about them. And then think about, how would I make a play about this person? What would I put if their apartment's on stage? What are the things that stand out that make this person them? It's really fun to think about. And I hope I'll give you the bug, and then it won't be just me doing this at everyone's house.
That's awesome. Don't come to my house because I live with another prop person. And yeah, we
Well,
both
that's fun though.
until we have to dust. Well, thank you, Kristin, for a very fun and informative evening, and for everyone else who shared your stories. Stay tuned to your emails and social media for upcoming Spaminars. I will give you dates that we are planning. We don't have topics yet, but we're working on them. June 16th, July 21st, and August 18th are hopefully our next three dates. If you're interested in joining SPAM and are a working prop manager in a nonprofit theater, opera company, or children's theater, or an educator who teaches prop classes, please visit our website or check the link in the chat to fill out our membership form. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Links are also going to be in the chat momentarily. Spaminars is produced by the Society of Prop Managers, with special thanks to SPAM members Patrick Drone, Freed, Ben Homan, Nikki Kulis, Jen McClure, Amy Peter, Sarah Pugh, Karen Robbie Vance, and Helen Fredicus. Thanks again for attending, and once again, please keep your suggestions for future Spaminars coming. We want to know what you want to learn about. Prop on, and we will see you next time. Have a good evening, everyone.